What if the royal family's perfect story is hiding a shocking truth? Meghan Markle's father made a bombshell claim years before Harry entered the picture. Something about her fertility that changes everything we've been told. But it gets worse. Could the pregnancies be staged? And why do the children look so different in every photo? Stick around, because the truth you're about to hear might just blow your mind. Before Prince Harry ever stepped into Meghan Markle's life, her father, Thomas Markle, had already sounded the alarm. In one of his early interviews, he revealed something that would forever change the way we look at Meghan's story. He claimed that years before she even met Harry, Meghan had frozen her eggs. But this wasn't about trying to preserve her youth or delay having children for the sake of her career. Thomas said it was because Meghan had serious fertility issues, something she might not have been able to overcome naturally. What's even more troubling is what Thomas Markle said happened after that procedure. He described how his daughter, the woman he once knew, had changed completely. She wasn't the same person anymore. According to him, Meghan became colder, more calculated, almost as though something in her personality had shifted permanently after freezing her eggs. This wasn't idle gossip. It was a direct statement from the man who had watched her grow up, and he said that something didn't feel real about her anymore. But here's the question that nobody seems to be asking. If Meghan really did struggle with fertility, and if her father saw a shift in her behavior, how is it possible that, years later, she suddenly appears with not one, but two perfectly healthy children? There's not a single public medical record to back up the miracle, and that's when things start to look a little less like a fairy tale and more like a carefully constructed story. Could Thomas Markle's warning be the first piece of a much larger puzzle? As if Thomas Markle's chilling warnings weren't enough, Meghan's brother, Thomas Markle Jr., took things to an entirely new level. In an interview that stunned the public, he didn't just mention frozen eggs. He went as far as to claim that Meghan had undergone a hysterectomy, a surgery that removes the uterus entirely. The implications of this statement are huge, because once someone has this procedure, a biological pregnancy becomes impossible. It's not a theory, it's a medical fact. No uterus means no ability to carry a child. So, if this procedure really happened while Meghan was still married to Trevor Ingleson, as Thomas Jr. suggests, then how could she have had children with Harry years later? The timeline completely falls apart, and the perfect royal story begins to unravel. If Meghan had a hysterectomy before she met Harry, there's no way she could have carried Archie or Lilibet. This wasn't a rumor or some random speculation. It was a direct claim from someone who is, quite literally, her family, and his allegations raise serious doubts about everything we've been told. This revelation creates a massive problem for the public narrative that we've all bought into. If Meghan truly had this surgery, the entire timeline of her pregnancies and children falls into question. No matter how many glossy photos the royal family releases, the facts don't match up. So, if the biological story doesn't hold up, what does that say about the rest of the fairy tale? The question now shifts from, what's the truth? Sass. Before the royal spotlight, Meghan Markle's life was far from the glamorous image we now associate her with. She was once married to a Hollywood producer, Trevor Ingleson, and their marriage lasted nearly a decade. During that time, the couple talked openly about starting a family, but something went terribly wrong. Despite their efforts, Meghan and Trevor couldn't conceive, and the fertility struggles became a part of their reality. Sources close to Trevor reveal that he desperately wanted children, but nothing seemed to work. Meghan reportedly underwent fertility treatments during her marriage, yet there were no signs of success. After years of trying, the marriage ended suddenly. No scandals, no public infidelity, no financial issues, just a quiet split and a few legal papers. The silence around the divorce only deepened the mystery. Why did their marriage end so abruptly, especially when starting a family seemed to be a shared goal? Now, here's the real question that makes everything even more puzzling. If Meghan couldn't conceive with Trevor, a man who was openly eager to have children, what changed years later? When Meghan met Prince Harry, there was no sign of any medical breakthrough, no IVF success stories, no sudden miracle cure. Yet, a few years after the divorce, Meghan was not only pregnant, but she had 2 children, Archie and Lilibet, who seemed to appear out of nowhere. No new treatments were reported. No medical records surfaced, and no one explained how this dramatic shift in her fertility occurred. It's almost as though the timing of everything, her marriage, her fertility struggles, and the sudden arrival of children, was far too convenient. So, the question lingers. What happened behind the scenes that allowed Meghan's fertility issues to vanish just when the world was watching? Let's take a step back and consider the financial side of things, because that's where things start to get really interesting. At the time, Meghan Markle was starring in Suits, and she was earning around $7,000 per episode. While that might sound like a decent paycheck, it's important to remember that Meghan's screen time on the show was limited. Her income, though steady, wasn't exactly enough to justify the kind of medical procedures we're talking about here. Now, freezing eggs isn't cheap. In fact, it's costly. The cost of egg freezing, including the procedures and long-term storage, can range between $8,000 and $9,000 per month. That's per month, not per year. So, if Meghan froze her eggs years ago, she would have been paying more to store them than she was actually making from acting on Suits. That's a huge financial burden. And let's be real, it's almost impossible to maintain that kind of ongoing medical bill for an extended period of time without a much higher income than Meghan was making at the time. Now, things take a turn from strange to downright bizarre. As if the financial and medical questions weren't enough, there's the undeniable evidence in the form of pregnancy footage that simply doesn't add up. We've all seen the pictures of Meghan's baby bump during her pregnancies, but something about those public appearances raises serious questions. In one particular video, Meghan bends down to pick up a small object, and her baby bump folds inward, almost as if it were made of foam. Then, in another clip, we see the belly shift unnaturally to the side while Meghan walks. It's subtle, but unmistakable, and it doesn't look like a natural pregnant belly at all. These aren't blurry, low-quality videos we're talking about. These are high-resolution, public recordings, and they've been analyzed frame by frame. What people saw wasn't a real pregnancy bump. It looked like a fabric prop moving inside her dress. It's the kind of thing you'd expect from a movie set, not from a royal pregnancy. But it doesn't end there. The inconsistencies don't stop with just one clip. In fact, there are multiple moments where the bump changes in size and shape between appearances. Sometimes, it's visibly round and firm. Other times, hours later, it's flat and barely noticeable. This is the kind of inconsistency that's impossible for a real pregnancy. Biology doesn't work like that. Foam, padding, and props, however, can shift and change at will. As if the bizarre pregnancy footage wasn't enough to raise doubts, the inconsistencies continue when it comes to family photos, specifically those involving Meghan's children. One of the most shocking moments came during a trip to Disneyland, where Meghan was photographed with her son, Archie. At first glance, everything seemed fine. But then, just one day later, more photos emerged, supposedly taken of the same children in the same location. The problem: the children didn't look the same at all. Fans and critics alike began to notice the stark differences: height, face shape, even hair tone. It wasn't just a matter of bad angles or lighting. The children appeared to be entirely different people. How could 2 photos, taken just a day apart, show children who looked so completely different from each other? The discrepancies were too obvious to ignore. This wasn't the only strange occurrence caught on camera. There's another moment where Meghan is holding one of the children, and something about the interaction feels off. The child appears stiff, not at all engaged with Meghan. No eye contact, no natural leaning into her. It's almost as if the child is being posed for the camera, like a prop rather than a real person. And then, almost immediately, a handler steps in and takes the child away. This moment of tension raises even more questions. In real family footage, children are full of energy. They cling to their parents, they laugh, they cry, they wiggle. But here, these children seem oddly detached, almost robotic. It's as though they're not there because they want to be, but because they're being placed and photographed for the image they're supposed to project. As if the strange footage and family photo inconsistencies weren't enough, things get even more puzzling when we dive into the official paperwork. When Archie was born, the public was presented with his birth certificate, which listed Meghan as Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Sussex. At first glance, it might seem like a simple detail. After all, she was married to Prince Harry, so it makes sense, right? But there's one major problem. Royal titles don't belong on legal documents in the United States. In the US, royal titles aren't legally recognized. They have no place on birth certificates or other official documents, which is why it was so strange when the certificate listed Meghan's title in the first place. But it gets even weirder. Shortly after the birth certificate was issued, that title was quietly removed, only to be added back in later. This wasn't some minor clerical error. This was a deliberate change. The mystery deepens when we learn that immigration officials were reportedly confused by the document and had to contact King Charles for clarification. Now, when was the last time you heard of immigration officials contacting a king over something as mundane as a birth certificate? This isn't something that happens with ordinary paperwork. Something in the certificate raised serious red flags, and the palace had to step in to smooth things over. As the controversy over the children's birth certificates grew, another surprising twist came when Prince Harry fought fiercely to give his children royal titles, despite royal policy clearly stating otherwise. Even after stepping away from royal duties, Harry refused to accept that his children wouldn't be recognized as Her Royal Highness and His Royal Highness. The policy, established long before he and Meghan decided to step down, was clear. The children of non-working royals were not entitled to royal titles. The late Queen herself had made that rule explicit, but Harry was determined to challenge it. It's hard to understand why someone would push so aggressively for royal titles, unless there was something to gain from them. Titles, after all, aren't just for show. They represent legitimacy, royal authority, and public recognition. By insisting on titles for Archie and Lilibet, Harry was not only defying long-standing royal protocol, but also creating a sense of royal validation for his children. Titles aren't just a name. They are a tool for establishing a lineage and making the story appear more authentic to the public. The fight went beyond private discussions. Harry made it a point to bring the issue up in public interviews, trying to win support for his stance. He pushed, he argued, and when things got heated, he refused to back down. Why? If the children were biologically his and Meghan's, wouldn't that be enough to establish their place within the royal family? Why go so far to fight for titles that were meant to be reserved for working royals? By now, it's become clear that something far bigger than a couple of royal parents hiding secrets is at play. Every time the questions about Meghan's pregnancies, her children, or the inconsistencies in the timeline started to resurface, something strange always seemed to happen. A new headline would suddenly go viral, distracting the public from the growing controversy. A perfectly timed, high-quality family photo would surface just when the public's focus began to shift back to the inconsistencies. It's not just a coincidence, it's a pattern, a carefully planned strategy. The timing of these distractions is too precise to be a fluke. When the questions around Archie and Lilibet's legitimacy gained momentum, a fresh viral video of Meghan twerking from years ago suddenly captured the internet's attention. It was as if someone had pushed the reset button, steering the conversation away from the real issue. Likewise, whenever people pointed out the striking differences in the children's appearance, A new, perfectly staged family photo hit social media, calming the noise for just long enough to keep the public from asking too many questions. At this point, it's impossible to ignore the fact that the story of Meghan and Harry is far more than just a personal saga. It's a matter of royal legacy. With every inconsistency, every unanswered question, the stakes only get higher. The royal family's public image, built over centuries of tradition, has always been a carefully guarded asset. And if there's one thing we know for sure, it's that the monarchy will do whatever it takes to protect its legacy, even if it means bending or hiding the truth. The ongoing battles over titles, documents, and the legitimacy of Meghan and Harry's children don't just matter for their personal lives, they impact the entire monarchy's credibility. The royal family has spent generations ensuring that their bloodline remains untarnished, and any deviation from the official narrative could threaten that carefully constructed image. This isn't just about Meghan and Harry, it's about preserving a narrative that keeps the public invested in the fairy tale of royal life. But when cracks start appearing, it becomes clear that the stakes are much higher than anyone has been willing to admit. Every time a discrepancy arises, every time the public starts questioning the story, the royal family seems to have an answer, usually in the form of a distraction, a new headline, or a perfectly timed photo. These tactics aren't accidental. They're deliberate moves to prevent the public from focusing on the bigger questions. As we piece together the puzzle, one thing becomes clear. The story we've been told about Meghan, Harry, and their children may not be as simple as it seems. What started as a fairy tale of love and royal grandeur has grown into a complex web of inconsistencies, financial struggles, and mysterious distractions. The questions surrounding Meghan's fertility, her pregnancies, and the legitimacy of her children have only deepened. And yet, each time the public starts to focus on them, something new and shiny emerges to divert attention away. We've heard the family's warnings, seen the unsettling footage, and noted the suspicious birth certificate discrepancies. We've watched as Harry fought for royal titles against established policies, pushing for legitimacy in ways that seem to protect more than just his children's names. And with every new distraction, it feels like the public is being pulled further away from the truth. But here's the thing, when so many pieces don't fit together, it's not just a coincidence, it's a strategy. A strategy designed to protect a carefully curated image, to maintain the illusion of a perfect royal family, and to keep the public invested in a story that might not be entirely real. We may never know the full extent of what's behind the royal curtain, but the deeper we look, the more we realize just how much has been hidden in plain sight. The truth is out there, waiting to be uncovered, and one day it may all come crashing down. Until then, the fairy tale will continue. But as more questions linger and more contradictions surface, we can't help but wonder, how long can this story remain untold, and what happens when the truth finally comes to light?